Hi there, and welcome to Catching Frisbees episode 2. There was never supposed to be an episode 2, but then there was an exchange with someone on the YouTube channel, and things got ugly, and here we are. I have banned that person. I'm not going to talk about the nature of the exchange or that person's handle, unless it turns out that that person has been doing similar things to other YouTube content creators, in which case all bets are off. But what's interesting here is some of the thinking that this has prompted, and that pondering has resulted in a couple of interesting outcomes. And one of those I'd like to talk about today, and that is the doubling down that I've had since that exchange, that what we're seeing is a cognitive clash. And the cognitive clash that we are seeing is between an NFP way of awareness and interacting with the world, and an STP way of awareness and interacting with the world. And to that, I would re-reference the Michael Pierce piece on ESTPs. It's very brief, maybe 20 seconds long, where he mentions that the ESTP is the nemesis of the INFP and goes into a bit of what I just talked about here. And it really comes down to that we're speaking a fundamentally different language. So it's easy to have misunderstanding. That misunderstanding can lead to all sorts of misattribution, and it can devolve from there. So if you could have a look at what Michael Pierce has got to say, I think you'd find it interesting. But suffice it to say, abstract ideation on the one hand, concrete logic on the other, and the things that I do to try and bridge into a more acceptable dulles are things that probably end up cheesing off STPs even more. Those would be, for instance, with TI Demon, using TI justifications for FI, because FI carries no legitimate weight in modern society. I can't say, I feel happy about this just because. I feel this is wrong because I feel that way. I have to rationalize why this is the case. So TI, 8th slot, is always in the servitude of the first slot. TI is in service of FI. So I bring it in as needed in order to explain the rationale behind what's actually feeling, but the rationale is convenient to try and put into words how I feel. I'm doing it now because I can't just say, this good, that bad, and have people understand what I'm getting at. So I think STPs sense that I am using logic very selectively, that I'm sort of ducking in and ducking out of it, and I can see where they would look at that and say, that is totally not kosher, completely unfair. You either use TI or you don't. You can't selectively decide, here I'll use TI, and now I won't, and now I'll bring it in again, and now I'll ditch it. And so I expect that's one aspect that these folks do not, that irritates them, rubs them the wrong way. The corollary to that is that being any tool, and having TI in servitude, what I can and do end up doing is I'll use rationale in 6-8 different ways, whatever happens to suit the aspect of what I'm trying to portray. So you end up with this very fluid, okay, the STP is arguing against X, and it's going to win. But wait, he's now shifted the goalposts, and he's over here because he's trying to explain another aspect of this. From my perspective, it's trying to say, it's kind of like this, but you only see this part of the puzzle. So now I have to show to you this other piece, and it's kind of like that. And let me show you this other piece, and it's kind of like this other thing. But again, this looks like somebody who is arbitrarily, whenever you're trying to get footing, saying, no, it's not that, it's this, it's not that, it's that, it's this other thing, and there's no purchase. And again, I can see where an STP would say, this is entirely unfair, somebody's playing bad poker. where the point of what I'm trying to do is to say, for our mutual understanding and for crossing the path into, or crossing grounds to a rationale that can be justified, I'm trying to come up with these helpful things. And yes, I'm not great at this, but if I can bring up enough of these things in different ways, maybe what I'm trying to say will get assembled and make sense. And yeah, I can see why STPs would find that incredibly frustrating. Then add to that something that Realities of Typology brought up. This was formerly Self-Help Lounge. He did a great video on a response video to my Catching Frisbees episode 1 called Dulles versus FE. It's 50 minutes long. There's a ton of other stuff he goes into, but he says two things in there that are fundamentally were enlightening to me. One I knew but didn't bring up. The other is a revelation, and that is he brings up his issue with INFPs is that they tend to try and bring things up in an equitable way where they don't actually, they may have some sort of agenda or feeling about things, but they're kind of careful to shroud that and instead present to you a bunch of stuff without prioritizing what's actually important to them. And so you'll kind of get like, well, it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be that, or it could be that. In fact, one of the things about this video is that I could discount it all by saying, I believe I'm an INFP, but I don't know for sure. So all of this could be incorrect if we decide that the fundamental assumptions underlying this are incorrect. I could also be incorrect with the STP relationships. There's many things I could be completely wrong on. I'm presenting what is a combination that appears to make sense. So with that segue, Realities of Typology did a great job bringing this to light and then pointing out that what's really going on here is an SE polar problem first and foremost. That SE being things related to force and decisiveness and the concreteness of things is like, have a go, put your eggs in a basket and just give me something. And an INFP kind of going this way and that and never conclusively kind of showing you stuff, but seeming to have an agenda in the background, possibly because the FI stuff is going on back there somewhere, but it's being kind of obfuscated. That'll look passive-aggressive. That'll look like somebody who's duplicitous, who's got something to hide. It'll look like someone who's not playing it straight. Therefore, the demand to say, give me SE, give me your firm opinion, give me a hill that you're going to die on so that I can kill you on it, sort of stuff. And it's like, well, I don't really have a hill that I'm interested in dying on. This is not a position where I don't feel like any one of these positions is something that I can firmly say, this is it, this is reality, this is the truth, and everything else is incorrect. And that is just part of that whole any tool, SE polar, you're just going to get, similar to INTPs, you're not going to get straight answers on stuff because everything could be this, it could be that. And then on top of that, you figure that words, yes, they mean things, but words are there to communicate stuff, and rationale is there to sort of try and make a point that originates from subjective feelings about things. You end up with someone that an STP will find incredibly frustrating to deal with because there's no there. And I do understand and sympathize. And unfortunately, that is my ontology. This is not my intentionally being a slippery character who's tough to deal with. It is my, I'd say curse, but that's not really correct. It's just the state of being that stuff that doesn't matter ends up being kind of put in this particular light where there's no clear steer from me. And a lot of stuff doesn't really matter. Especially the stuff that an STP holds most dear. It's like, well, that's just a utility, and I don't know what this other thing is. So, and that's, if it's any consolation for the STP to the INFP, that's what I see. When I look at STPs negatively, it is sort of like they're not aware on the ESTP front of their own feelings necessarily, and then act out on things in a way that can be scary and unpredictable because there's this sudden lashing out without a thought to the potential to cause harm to other people. And I mean that more in an existential way rather than punching people's lights out, because nobody should do that. One example out there that I'll put in the links potentially, and this is more just for folks to look at how someone can get very angry at INFPs, and I suppose from their perspective it's justified because of the lack of understanding between the types, is someone called Tiger Blackie. And she did this many years back. The comments are turned off. Please be kind to that person, because that video is valuable. And the last thing in the world that I want is for that video to be taken down because somebody's complaining that INFPs are cast in a bad light. I want to see the bad light so that we can all have a look and use that as a mirror back to say, okay, what does this person see and what can I pull from that? So again, I'll put the link of that up as well. And then finally, some other interesting points that I would point you toward are made by a YouTuber called Skimmerlit. Skimmerlit, I believe, identifies as an INTP. Seems about as INTP-ish as anyone I've ever known. And he put together a piece just recently on FE, and it's from his perspective of backslot FE. And I'll paraphrase here. One of the things he gets into is that backslot FE is kind of like be accommodating, be nice, attend to the social fabric and do all of that stuff. And you get to a point where it's like, okay, forget this and flip the table because I can't take it anymore. And that seems a little bit like the sorts of rare but memorable experiences that I've had, that it's like you hit someone the wrong way and it's like something that hits their social fabric and they're just like, forget it, flip the table. I'm just going to, come at you. And okay, this is kind of the way that I see the whole stack work, in a way where the two cognitive stacks, the two methods of cognition, are fundamentally different. And that is where we end up with this miscommunication, that what I end up being the cause of, because I start off by saying, hey, there's a spot on your shirt, that equivalent of somebody made something that looks like a logical error, and even though it's guided by feeling that like, well, this is important, this person made a logical error, it should be corrected. That's something that's then regarded as an attack, where I'm thinking of it like, if I were to make this sort of blatant error, I would want somebody to tell me about it, and then we'd have a good laugh and we'd move on. But that's not how everyone is. And so that's not necessarily the reaction that always happens. Not that I'm going around correcting people all the time. It was each of the instances where this has happened has been for very different reasons. But that generally it is my reaching out with a particular thing that strikes someone the wrong way. And I see it as that third or fourth slot FE reaction that's flip the table and, fists up, or, verbal fists up, if you will. Anyway, that's enough for me. I'll leave the links down in the description of the video. I hope that this is potentially interesting. And I will just close it by saying that, again, I know NFJs. NFJs are people who are very dear to me. I have not had conflicts with NFJs that have resulted in any sort of a negative outcome, and at least not people who I've clearly identified as NFJs in my life. It seems like we have more in common despite our differences than we have differences. And that's why I come at this thinking, well, if I'm an INFP, then this is a model where the SETI or TI-SE, NI, FE, FENI, and the FINE, SITE stacks end up butting heads. And so it's a way to explain the experience in a fashion of cognition and fundamentally different views of the world, different awareness of the world. And that's one of the things that MBTI is built for and why it's effective, is to be able to stand back and say, why am I cheesing people off? What is it that I've done? And what's their perspective on the world so that I can learn from this? And I don't know if there's something that I can do to improve other than not engage with people. And I don't know if I'm going to change my method of engagement or not. Perhaps we will see. But at least now I have an idea of what's happening and why, or at least what seems to be a comprehensive explanation for it. And with that, I will bid you a good afternoon, good morning, and a good day.